Welcome to In Pursuit of Truth. This is your host, Sir Patrick Mack. We are back once again, so grab your coffee, fist bump your neighbor, and let's get started. There's a ton of things in the news to talk about, but in particular, I want to talk a little bit about SpaceX today, the U.S. Air Force, Skynet, Starlink, 5G, and even D5. You're looking at some promo video from SpaceX and their Starlink program, and here is a tweet from the Third Row podcast sent on February 23rd. The U.S. Air Force used Starlink's first two test satellites to beam to terminals fixed to a military plane in flight, demonstrating internet speeds of 610 megabits per second, SpaceX SVP Tim Hughes said. That's fast enough to download a movie in under a minute. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about this Starlink program, which sounds a lot like Skynet, but it's not. It's not the same thing. Skynet was something completely different. This is Starlink, and that was Skynet. Totally different programs. Anyway, let's get a little bit of information from Real Engineering's YouTube page, where they explain a little bit about this Starlink program.
On the 24th of May, SpaceX launched a Falcon 9 rocket filled with 60 satellites into space. This marked the beginning of their ambitious new project called Starlink, which aims to provide high-quality broadband internet to the most isolated parts of the planet, while also providing low-latency connectivity to already well-connected cities. SpaceX aimed to make their broadband as accessible as possible, claiming that anyone will be able to connect to their network if they buy the pizza box-sized antenna, which SpaceX is developing themselves. This launch of 60 satellites was just the first of many. SpaceX has 12,000 satellites planned for launch over the next decade, dramatically increasing the total amount of spacecraft around Earth's orbit. Each satellite can cover a circular area with a radius of 500 kilometers. At SpaceX's originally planned orbit, this coverage had a radius of 1,060 kilometers. Lowering the altitude of a satellite decreases the area it can cover, but also decreases the latency. This is particularly noticeable for typical communication satellites operating in geostationary orbit at an altitude of 36,000 kilometers. The time it takes data to travel up to the satellite and back down, traveling at the speed of light, is around 240 milliseconds, 369% slower than our subsea cable. However, since Starlink is intending to operate at a much lower altitude, the up and downlink theoretical latency could be as low as 3.6 milliseconds. This is why SpaceX needs so many satellites in their constellation in order to provide worldwide coverage. Let's look at SpaceX's proposed constellation to see how this will work. SpaceX's first phase of 1,584 satellites will occupy 24 orbital planes, with 66 satellites in each plane inclined at 53 degrees. If everything goes to plan, Starlink is estimated to generate 30 billion to 50 billion in revenue each year on the back of premium stock exchange memberships, demolishing their current annual revenue of around 3 billion. And this is a vital part of Elon Musk's long-term goals. The money generated from Starlink will mean SpaceX will have vastly more funding than NASA, which could go on to fund research and development of new rockets and the technologies needed to monetize lunar and Martian colonies.
Alright, so I will leave you the link to the full video down below to the Real Engineering page, who do a great job explaining this Starlink satellite system, which SpaceX stands to make a grip of cash off of, like the video said, a budget even bigger than NASA, which is something that we probably should be talking about. But it looks like, regardless of how you feel about the health effects or the security ramifications of this system, it looks to me like this is going to be a massive 5G rollout. And we've seen this already. The FCC has already approved a couple of these rollouts. You are looking at a video from about 8 months ago. As you can see, there's a little trail of satellites right there. These seem to be smaller satellites that will burn up upon re-entry. I think they're kind of like reusable, but they use thousands. That's the whole plan. Thousands of these smaller satellites, which will be hovering at a much lower orbit to reduce latency. And of course, because they're smaller, they have a smaller range, and that's the need for the thousands of satellites. So it's a little bit creepy stuff. And I gotta say, you know, we already have a lot of great information in regards to 4G technology, which isn't necessarily healthy either, is it? But it seems to operate our phones and our computers just fine. And depending on your internet service provider will really be what creates the difference in your own internet speeds or latency and whatnot. But the way this is all being sold to us is that this is going to offer high-speed internet all across the planet. Now, is that exactly what we really need? Is there really more to this? It seems like there would be. Now, I want to take you to this article from the other day. It's from the 21st from investors.com. SpaceX Starling satellites will play a major role in an Air Force live fire exercise in April, and a Virgin Galactic sister company is in talks to potentially join in as well. In December, the Air Force tested its experimental advanced battle management system that will connect air, sea, land, and space assets. The exercise was deemed an overall success, with SpaceX Starlink satellites used to link to a Lockheed Martin AC-130 gunship. As a next step, the Air Force's April 8th event is going to be massive. So a massive event on April 8th. Air Force Acquisition Chief William Roper told reporters at the Pentagon Friday, the SpaceX Starlink satellites will play an even bigger role than in December, as Roper wants them to connect to more assets, including platforms on the ground. SpaceX has been a great industry partner for us, he said. They are very excited. I bet they are. And we are excited to learn more about their satellites through the demonstration. The exercise will include live fire drills, such as taking down a UAV and shooting down a cruise missile. Okay, well, that doesn't sound at all like just high-speed internet, does it? They will be performed across the country, from Marine Corps Air Station Yuma in Arizona to Eglin Air Force Base in Florida. SpaceX Starlink may not be the only commercial space provider in the exercises. Roper said that he is in discussions with Virgin Orbit, the privately held sister company of Virgin Galactic, to participate with its Launcher One to provide on-demand launches. Virgin Orbit is dedicated to launching small satellites via its Launcher One rocket, which is launched in midair off a modified Boeing 747 jumbo jet. Now, let me skip you down just a little further here. SpaceX, founded by Tesla CEO Elon Musk, has said it needs 400 Starlink satellites for minor broadband internet coverage and 800 for moderate coverage. The company eventually plans to deploy over 40,000 satellites, and keep in mind, low-flying satellites, to offer space-based internet service. SpaceX launched its latest batch of Starlink satellites on Monday, bringing the total number of satellites in orbit to over 300. Okay, so whether you love this, hate this, are unsure or indifferent, or somewhere in between, this appears to be going down in a very big way. Like they said, massive. And it remains to be seen how massive this April 8th event is really going to be. But I imagine it really truly is going to be huge. Now, this doesn't just suggest to me a massive 5G rollout. Given the Air Force's involvement, I imagine this is also a Space Force rollout, right? After all, so much of this is in their wheelhouse. Now, there's a lot of moving parts here, good and bad. And it's really, really hard to kind of wrap my head around, because I think this has long-term implications that we don't really truly understand just yet. Now, you could argue that so much of this is in defensive posture in relation to China's global ambitions. China has been going after this kind of thing for quite some time. As a matter of fact, they kind of have the jump on everybody. And a lot of our American top brass has been mentioning this over the last few years, particularly since President Trump got in office. And of course, President Trump has made it a priority, whether he was clowned in the media about it or not, to make sure that Space Force was a big priority. So whether you like it or not, this is essentially going down. Now, there are other implications, of course. The health implications of 5G technology, of which I am not an expert on, But it seems to me like a lot of the science that's out there that's being offered to us suggests that it's not very beneficial to humans, right? Now, I don't really know the truth of that, and I'm not really interested in debating about that, but I do think it is something that we should be talking about. And given the fact that the mainstream media is not talking about it, suggests to me that we should be talking about this. But of course, I make the joke about Skynet, which of course is the famous global security system that was in the Terminator movies. But this is very much Skynet-ish, right? Starlink, Skynet. This is essentially what we're looking at. And like I suggested in earlier in the video, this looks to me like a massive neural link going across the globe. And of course, this is going to involve so much AI technology that we barely have a grasp of right now. So it's really difficult for me to talk about, not being much of a tech guy, but I don't think it takes a genius to see that this has some really, really big implications and ramifications that are going to last decades to come. Now, moving on to our next story, if you are following QAnon, you'll know that QAnon has referenced the term D5 quite a few different times, and we have picked up on this and have analyzed this term quite a few times and found quite a few different results, right? From the avalanche to the chess move to the name Donald Trump itself. There's quite a few different D5 answers that we could be talking about, and I want to expand on one today. This is in regards to an article from Hamodia.com from the 20th. Gantz on Fifth Dimension investigation. Nothing to see here. That also sounds familiar, doesn't it? In his first public comments on an investigation into the activities of the high-tech company he managed until its bankruptcy, Blue and White head Benny Gantz said that the fact that an investigation was set to take place did not bother him. "I am perfectly calm," Gantz told Rashid Bet Thursday. "There was nothing wrong with the way I managed the company. The investigation is due to political pressure on the state attorney. I welcome any investigation. I am positive that I have nothing to hide." Gantz was responding to reports Wednesday that State Attorney Avicii Mandelblit had authorized the investigation into possible illegal activities by the Fifth Dimension, Hamimad Hachamashi tech firm. The investigation will focus on the period that Gantz was the CEO of the company. Documents revealed that Yisrael Hayom last month show that Israel police purchased an artificial intelligence system from Fifth Dimension. The purchase was made without a tender, ignoring strictures of the Public Security Ministry, which supervises the activities of the police and which specifically requires contracts of NIS, being shekels, 50 million shekels or more, with outside agencies to be approved by the ministry's financial department. The police ignored that requirement and made the deal with the company, the documents show. The documents intensify the questions that have surrounded the relationship between police and the company led by Gantz through the end of 2018 when it went bankrupt. Last March, a report by the state comptroller focused on similar issues, with police signing contracts with the company without going through a required tender process. Under the contracts, Hamimad Hachamishi sold cybersecurity technology to police. Israel Police was Hamimad Hachamashi's only customer. The comptroller's report featured no fewer than 18 instances in which police purchased goods and services without going through the required tender process, said Shlomo Raz, a spokesperson for the state comptroller's office. Okay, so this is pretty wild. So the Israeli police were the only client of this Fifth Dimension group, and it looked like their deal wasn't a very legit deal, considering that if it was past so much money, it needed to be approved, and they didn't go through the proper approval. This is where it starts to get interesting right here. Immediately upon the release of the comptroller's report, the Likud demanded an investigation into the deal. State Attorney Avicii Mandelblit said at the time that such an investigation was unlikely. Erdogan said that in light of the new revelations, an investigation should be opened today. The truth must come out, and these new documents provide a perfect backdrop for that to happen. There's no reason that the state attorney should have left this languishing for 10 months. The public needs to know before the elections whether a criminal investigation into Gantz and other suspicious individuals in these incidents is going to be opened, he added. Speaking to 103 Radio Thursday, Gantz said that Benjamin Netanyahu and the Likud were trying to stir up the matter, which has been investigated already, in order to deflect attention from the Prime Minister's own legal woes. He is trying to change the agenda which surrounds his trial. Netanyahu has a load of legal issues on his head, Gantz said. The investigation will only open after the March 2 elections, and as of now, neither Gantz nor Noni Alshish, who was head of Israel police at the time the deals were made, are suspected of any wrongdoing, the prosecutor's office said Thursday. Okay, but we know that the deal was already suspect, and of course Benjamin Netanyahu does want to see this go down. Of course he has reasons for that, because he does have a load of legal issues on his head. And interestingly enough, he was on Mark Levin, being Netanyahu, was on Mark Levin the other day, and I posted it just yesterday on Twitter, and it was immediately taken down. Not just the video, but the account itself was removed. Now, I have no idea if the interview is still up there. I was not able to find it at the time of making this video. That may have changed, but it was, I believe, from the 23rd, dated the 23rd, the interview with Benjamin Netanyahu, where they actually bring up this case, and Netanyahu was stating that they need to do this before the elections. Now, of course, we know his reasons for wanting to do that, but this seems very, very sketchy. Remember, only one client, and they poured a ton of money into this, and there were some benefactors from this group. Now let's talk about one of them. Russian oligarch Viktor Vekselberg, you may remember that name, was once a benefactor of Fifth Dimension Holdings, the now defunct predictive analytics company that tarnished the careers of its chairman, Israeli general turned politician Benny Gantz, and former deputy head of Mossad Ram Ben Barak. In a recent interview with Calculist, Vekselberg talked about what led to the company's failure. Fifth Dimension failed because its marketing strategy was incorrect. Yeah, well, I'd say going after only one client is incorrect. There was a serious strategic mistake, and it cost us $30 million. Vekselberg is not just another investor looking to capitalize on Israel's booming tech sector. One of Russia's richest men, 62-year-old Vekselberg, is worth more than $11 billion according to Forbes, which ranked him number 119 on the 2019 list of the world's richest. A businessman and the owner of Moscow-based asset management company Renova Group, Vekselberg is in the inner circle of Russian Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev and is also close to President Vladimir Putin. For years, Vekselberg built a reputation as the most westernized of oligarchs, a sort of Russian ambassador to the U.S. who has had a part in numerous collaborations between the two countries. Vekselberg was a donor and key figure at the prestigious Massachusetts Institute of Technology and owned several properties in New York and Connecticut. And then, as the relations between the U.S. and Russia grew contentious, Vekselberg found himself in the thick of it. In March 2018, when his plane landed in New York, Vekselberg was detained for questioning by special counsel Robert Mueller and his team as part of an investigation into possible Russian interference in the 2016 U.S. presidential election. The questioning pertain to Vekselberg's connections with Michael Cohen, Donald Trump's former lawyer, who is currently serving a sentence for fraud and violation of campaign finance laws. Vekselberg was released, but his connection to Trump is still being examined. Okay, so I want to skip you forward because this is a pretty long article here, but Vekselberg ends up getting sanctioned by the U.S. Department of Treasury. And it says here, overnight, Vekselberg became a persona non grata in the U.S. He was denied entry into the country, preventing him from seeing his daughter and grandson. And if you'll remember, of course, he was being asked about this meeting with Michael Cohen just before Trump's inauguration, but nothing was being said about his massive contributions to the Clinton Foundation, John Podesta and Hillary Clinton, by way of this Metcom Bank, which is part of Renova. It's all owned by Vekselberg, and of course this money was going straight to them, a ton of coin. Using the Countering America's Adversaries Through Sanctions Act, Vekselberg's American assets, valued at $2 billion, were frozen. To this day, U.S. nationals are better off not being seen with him. And then it talks about here him being granted Israeli citizenship. He has Israeli citizenship. He's got citizenship in Russia and Ukraine, as well as Cyprus. So how about that? Vekselberg is also considering buying a home in the country, being Israel. One of Russia's most famous people, he is practically unknown in Israel, despite his frequent visits. Before his name became connected with Fifth Dimension, Vekselberg had successfully maintained a low profile. Founded in 2014, Fifth Dimension developed predictive policing and threat assessment technologies. That sounds like Skynet for governments and financial institutions. It quickly gained attention, among other reasons, because it targeted a similar market to that of Palo Alto-based Palantir Technologies, which also is Skynet, which is currently planning a $20 billion IPO. This promise attracted Gantz, who joined in 2015 and was then followed in 2016 by the former deputy head of Mossad, Ram Ben Barak. Okay, so we're skipping you even further. So long story short, this fifth dimension went under, and Vekselberg was one of the ones that was saying that they should have diversified more rather than just having this one client. People close to Vekselberg's asset management company, Renova Group, who spoke to Calculus on condition of anonymity, confirmed that there had been an attempt to recruit Russian clients, and that fifth dimension executives met with the Russian Ministry of Defense. These people said that while the product was well received, ultimately the Russians were apprehensive about buying Israeli-made surveillance technology. Fifth Dimension's deep connections with the Israeli security services went on to hinder several other foreign deals, these people said. Okay, so I got to skip you down even further. I know it's a really long article here, but I think this is important. But even with the ever-tightening connections to Israel, it is hard to ignore the importance of U.S. cash, or lack thereof. In the meantime, money to Skolkovo flows primarily from private investors and from Vekselberg himself. When the project was first launched, multinationals such as Intel, Google, and Microsoft showed interest. Cisco went as far as committing to a $1 billion investment. But then the FBI reminded these companies that Skolkovo was still partially backed by the Russian government and floated concerns of information theft, and the Americans decided to keep away. Then came the sanctions, and another channel of funding and collaboration opportunities was blocked. Now, I know that this is lengthy, probably a little bit boring, but I do think it's important and highly relevant. I was able to find part of this interview. I am not going to play it for you because I'm assuming if the channel got deleted, then mine possibly could too, and maybe just even talking about this subject could cause me some trouble. But I will link you this Fox News article down below where you can see part of the interview. As you can see, there's a screenshot right there with Mark Levin. And sadly, this isn't the part that I would have wanted to show you in the interview. And maybe by the time that this gets posted, you'll be able to see the entire Mark Levin interview if you have not seen it already. But I would suggest checking out this part of the interview in which he's asking about the Blue and White Party, which is the opposition party to Netanyahu. And of course, the Blue and White Party is made up of a lot of sub-parties that have a lot of Arab interests, which don't seem to be very pro-Israel. And that's very curious too. Netanyahu seems to be undergoing a very similar situation as President Trump. And it seems like a lot of the same people that are trying to take down Netanyahu are also linked to the same kind of people that were trying to take down President Trump. And at the same time, both of them have very similar connections. So it's all very, very convoluted. But I think what we see here is that whatever was going on with this fifth dimension group seemed to want to take down Netanyahu, and they only had one client. It just happened to be the police for all that money. That just seems very, very strange. And of course, a lot of the benefactors were people that were supporting people like Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden's, and people like this. It just doesn't seem right, does it? And I think that seems to start to make sense. And perhaps this is the D5 that Q is referencing that would eventually snowball and bring it all down, because it seems like everyone is wrapped up somehow in this. So like I said, please check out this video. Now, in regards to this fifth dimension, they were they were started by this guy Caspi. I don't know if it's Guy Caspi or Guy Caspi, but he is a mathematician and kind of almost has that creepy supervillain look about him. But he also started this group called Deep Instinct, cybersecurity company that applies deep learning to cybersecurity. The company implements advanced artificial intelligence to the task of preventing and detecting malware. Okay, well, this stuff almost gets into the pre-crime aspect of this whole thing, which is very, very strange. It says here that NVIDIA is an investor. That's an American tech company, and I'm not going to talk much about them, but I am going to flash you their logo because it's very, very telling. As you can see, there's the all-seeing eye right there. And of course, that little spiral suggests that they like them young, if you know what I mean. In April 2019, Deep Instinct commissioned an art project titled The Persistence of Chaos by Chinese artist Wo Dom, consisting of a laptop infected with 6 pieces of malware that represented $95 billion in damages. The art was auctioned with a final bid of $1,345,000. Okay, that sounds like another funneling project, but that's probably a story for a different day. But I think you get the idea here. Whatever it was that Deep Instinct and this fifth dimension was wrapped up in seems to have a lot of information about a lot of people. And it was a whole bunch of money spent for nothing. Just seems a little suspect to me. And the people that were benefiting the most were also benefactors to people like John Podesta and Hillary Clinton. So is this fifth dimension situation part of the D5 that Q is often referencing? Not really sure, but it does seem like there is some compelling information to suggest that it is indeed possible. Now I do have to move on because Q's dropping bombs after I'm almost finished. 36 minutes after the hour of 8, post 3881. This is a reference to December 18th, 2019 post where Q was talking about all the different people fired from all the different agencies, FBI, DOJ, State Department, Senate. These are people that have either been fired or forced. We've talked about this over the last couple of years in great length. Then the Twitter status here takes you to Nate Kane. We talked about him the other day. Here's the interview you've all been waiting for. In it, I share the details of what happened from start to finish and the aftermath. I pray it will make a difference. And they're talking about this interview with the Bards of War on the Bards of War podcast. Please go check this out. I shared it the other day. Really, really great job. Thanks to you for Bards of War, and congratulations for both of you for getting a shout out from Q. But this is indeed a great interview. Nate Kane, of course, a whistleblower on the Clinton Foundation, had a bunch of boxes and boxes of information in regards to the Clintons, Uranium One, and this is really a worthwhile interview. Nate Kane's done quite a few different interviews, but I really particularly like this one. So I would suggest I will link this one down below for you too, and of course it will be linked if you follow these links here on Qmap. But go check it out. Q says, listen carefully. Think regarding why no arrest, justice yet. What if almost every critical position senior within the U.S. government apparatus was infiltrated? Yeah, and President Trump has expressed his frustration with this quite often, right? Always saying, boy, this thing runs so much deeper than you could ever imagine. What must be done first? The swamp runs deep. Plus sleepers. And that's really the tricky part, right? Is knowing who indeed is a sleeper. There's a lot of people that come out looking outwardly like they are pro-POTUS and maybe not so much. And that's not real easy to figure out when you're dealing with this every day. Backgrounds are important. Muslim Brotherhood. List of in the news now names with known ties to Islam. Well, of course, you have some of these newer folks like Ilhan Omar Bromar. She's been taking that CARE money. And of course, CARE, although they won't admit it, are directly wrapped up with Muslim Brotherhood. Of course, Rashida Tlaib. And you can go back to Eric Holder. Of course, Barack Hussein in the membrane. Obama, Valerie Jarrett. And of course, John, he's a brute by Brennan. Lots of people that were infiltrating our government have ties to the Muslim Brotherhood. They're still getting government funding to this day. List of in the news now names with known ties to Islam. This is not another 4-year election. Indeed, it is not. And as you can see, this thing has gone off the rails. Looks like Bernie Sanders is gaining more and more steam. And I never thought I'd see the day that we would have basically a known socialist come out and be one of the front runners for the President of the United States. Q says assumptions correct. Package well received. Known Q. Well, it sounds like Q, usually when they get a package, they usually like to send one back out. But we're going to move on for now. We got one more post here. 3882, 52 minutes after the hour of 8. We get taken back to this older document here from 2009, and Q puts a little quote here, but let me show you the document. U.S. Government Counterinsurgency Guide from January 2009. And I also want to point out, if you'll remember, Michelle Bachmann back in the day was going after the Clintons, and they were one of the first to kind of use it against her, calling that a witch hunt. And I can't help but think that when President Trump keeps referencing the witch hunt, that it has to do with a lot of this. And unfortunately, because I just spent most of the video working on this other stuff, I will probably have to see if there's more to drum out of this that will be relevant information, but I will leave this for you down below because it is 67 pages. But Q dials us into this. Insurgency is the organized use of subversion and violence to seize, nullify, or challenge political control of a region. The presidency of Barack Hussein Obama began at noon Eastern Standard Time on January 20th, 2009, when Barack Obama was inaugurated as the 44th President of the United States. What country was the true intended target? Well, it almost seems like the takedown of the United States was the target, right? We've talked about this before. The 16-year plan, whether it be Barack Obama first and Clinton second, or vice versa, that seemed to have been the plan, to bring it all down from the inside, because naturally you're not going to get voters to just outwardly vote for socialism. We're going to see that struggle come up soon enough, right? But when you infiltrate for so many years all these different people, whether, like I just said, guys like John Brennan infiltrating our government, our intelligence agencies, it becomes very, very subversive over small periods of, over in small increments over a long period of time. And that's essentially why this was a 16-year plan. Now, there's probably more going to be coming on this, so I will get back to you on more of this, but I will leave this for you down below. Those are your posts. As always, if you like this video, please click like, share, and subscribe. Thanks to all of you who do that already. If you're new to my channel, please understand that you're going to get unclicked and unsubscribed from time to time. It happens all the time. Just do me a favor and re-click yourself and stick it to the man. All my alternate links are down below. My Gab, my BitChute, my Brightn.com, my DropSpace. It's all down below. You know where to find it. And my email is down there. My P.O. box is down there. And my Patreon is down there if you'd like to support the channel. It's all linked in the video description. And until next time, stay funky, Patriots.